circus came to the pretty city. What hardly ever happens anywhere happened here. The World Championship was decided in the last race on this track. One man almost had it wrapped up before he got here, but only almost. There were 3 men still in the running. The most exciting Grand Prix season in years was not yet over. It started in Rio, a mecca for muggers where the currency inflates in your pocket like a dead dog in the sun. But it's still one of the most exciting cities in the world. Why is this? Could it be something to do with Brazil's breathtakingly beautiful women? Judging a beauty contest, Alboreto and Rosberg consulted Piquet, a local boy who should have known. As race day drew near, the girls hit the beach to tone up their muscles for the burden of wearing sponsors' t-shirts and the big chance of meeting Christian Danner. Not that there was any shortage of handsome drivers. McLaren still had the reigning world champion, Alain Prost. One-time world champion Keke Rosberg had left Williams to join them, but whether he had timed his move well was in doubt. Because Williams had started doing well again towards the end of the previous year, with Nigel Mansell acquiring a taste for winning. Ex-world champion Nelson Piquet, with no taste for losing, had left Brabham in order to get a car he could rely on, and he also would now be in a tearing hurry. Back in England, recovering from a frightful car crash, Frank Williams would have to watch his 2 drivers fight it out on television. At Ferrari, Michele Alboreto would continue into another year his heroic struggle to make sense of the car's performance and the chaos at Maranello. Stefan Johansson's broad smile would be strained to the limit if the Ferrari ran true to form, but everyone hoped that it would do better than that. At Lotus, drama had already begun between seasons. Brazil's hot shoe hard man Ayrton Senna had ungenerously said that the team couldn't support 2 stars, so Derek Warwick, who was almost hired, was unhired. Johnny Dumfries was brought in as a slave. With second-best service guaranteed, he was on a hiding to nothing. But British aristos are made of steely stuff. The drama at Brabham was all potential. Riccardo Patrese was brought in, and Piquet, having left for Williams, had been replaced by Elio De Angelis, whose move from Lotus could turn out to be mistimed if Gordon Murray's revolutionary new low-profile design did not deliver the goods. Benetton sports clothes had now given their name to the car which, when it was called the Tolman, had been a joke until it started to go fast. By now, with a BMW engine, it was going fast enough to be a threat. Theo Fabi, the Fabi brother with the least hair, was partnered by Gerhard Berger, a fast young thing some experts put in the Senna class, except nicer. Not that niceness would matter much. If it did, Jacques Lafitte would have been world champion every year. But the Ligier was going well again, and the veteran might be in with a chance, along with René Arnoux, back after a year off, once Prost's partner in the aggro-ridden Renault team, once also at Ferrari, always a quick driver. At Arrows, everything was iffy as always. A lot of things would have to come right before either Marc Surer or Thierry Boutsen finished in the points. It isn't just a question of how you drive, but of what you drive, and of how long what you drive keeps going. Ken Tyrrell's team still had the talented British driver Martin Brundle, who was still hoping that the car would be as good as he was. Philippe Streff was stuck with a new boy image that threatened to go curly at the corners unless he could get some results. The Haas Lola started the year called the Lola Heart. Alan Jones was a proven quantity. It was the car that wasn't. But with the new Ford 6-cylinder engine promised for later in the season, this might be the vehicle to extend Jones's comeback all the way to the winner's dais. Patrick Tambay, however, once of Renault and Ferrari, was there to remind Jones that even the most promising car has to get you all the way there, or you don't make it. Almost everything about the Minardi team was an unknown quantity, except Andrea de Cesaris, who had established a reputation for being someone to steer clear of, even when he was stationary. It was generally agreed that Alessandro Nannini would have to watch out during pit stops, lest his mercurial teammate ram him from behind. The Ozella team was led by Piercarlo Ghinzani, survivor of the highest speed shunt of all time at Kyalami in 1984. His teammate Christian Danner, first Grand Prix driver to wear an earring, was much adored by women, who would get plenty of chances to look at him if the Ozella maintained its track record of going nowhere and not very fast. At Zackspeed, British driver Jonathan Palmer was ploughing a lonely furrow. He was keen to prove how good he was, but the only thing the car had a lot of was teething troubles. The last two competitors were both non-drivers, but savage rivals whose clash would dominate this season like any other. Jean-Marie Balestre, as head of FISA, the governing body, had made the rules which Bernie Eccleston, as head of FOCA, the Constructors Association, would, on behalf of the Formula One circus, do his best to understand. Bernie's main task would be to read Balestre's mind before he could change it. That was the lineup as I left behind my important researchers at the beach and appeared in the pits to eyeball the revised machinery. The photographers looked pretty much the same as last year. So did most of the cars. They had all been variously tweaked to cope with the new fuel limit, down from 220 litres to 195 at room temperature. But the modifications tended not to show through the smooth outer shell of fiberglass held together by advertising. Except, that is, for Gordon Murray's new Brabham, on which he gave me the lowdown. And you couldn't get lower down than this. His new brainchild looked like a high-speed sleeping bag for the Royal Navy. In practice, Mansell was quick. Piquet was very quick. And Senna was quicker still. The Brazilians still loved Piquet best, but Senna was from Brazil too, and now they liked him best as well, or even more so. Senna deserved the pole, although some said that his whole car was like a qualifying tyre. The girls from the beach were on the grid bearing the colours of John Player, who sell even more cigarettes in Brazil than Marlboro do. John Player was the first billboard to leave the start line, carried at high speed by Senna's Lotus Renault. Mansell, in the Williams Honda, was disinclined to see Senna disappear. Mansell tried to settle the race on lap 1 and paid the penalty. Senna stuck to the racing line and left Mansell to argue with the scenery. With the memory still fresh of a similar incident in Adelaide the previous year, Senna was much criticised for his lack of compassion, but Mansell correctly drew the conclusion that ethics have small bearing on tactics. He was never to be so impulsive again. Senna raced on with another Williams Honda after him, Piquet, who in front of the home crowd was keen to prove that of the two boys from Brazil, he was still the one. Piquet went past and drew away, but it might not have been all down to skill. The Williams Honda, with a better fuel management system, had a more generous boost-juice ratio than any other car, including the Ferrari, and possibly also including even the McLaren. Anyway, Rosberg's car blew up with the strain of trying to reconcile its delicate mechanical requirements with the weight of the Finnish foot. But Prost kept going. From 9th on the grid, he went past Johansson into 5th place. Piquet was all alone up ahead. After dealing with Arnoux Ligier, Prost went past Alboretto's Ferrari into 3rd place. Piquet came in for tyres. Senna was back in the lead, but now Prost was right on his tail. The McLaren re-established its superiority as in days of old. It looked so like last year it was almost comforting. De Angelis's Brabham found a way of getting even closer to the ground. Senna came in for new wheels. Prost was now in the lead, but something was wrong with his fuel system. Piquet on his fresh tyres was catching up. Prost went in for new wheels. He went out again third behind Senna, while the wise Virgin Piquet kept going past the Williams Honda of Mansell, the foolish Virgin. Prost got out of the car, his engine ruined by weak fuel, a wasted race for the McLarens. Dumfries was doing surprisingly well for someone who had spent last season driving cars that had to change down going uphill. Piquet came in for his third set of wheels. Senna was out on his own for a while, but it was an illusion. His Renault engine with desmodromic valves forgave everything up to 13,000 revs, but it was too thirsty to run the same boost as the Honda. And then he needed new wheels too. Lafitte and Arnoux in the Ligiers had not only kept going, they were racing each other for third place. So Nelson Piquet of Brazil came home first in the Brazilian Grand Prix. Once again he had a car that went like him. Ayrton Senna of Brazil came home second. Jacques Lafitte was third in the Ligier, René Arnoux was fourth in his Ligier. Many gallons of champagne were sprayed into the air instead of into the mouths of the thirsty spectators who would only have drunk the stuff. Next stop, Spain, where the locals were unworried by fuel regulations because Tio Pepe Sherry was one of the sponsors. But Jerez was not only the first of the 3 new circuits on which the fast cars would appear this season, it was one on which the fuel ration would be critical. Yet even if the whole Grand Prix circus ran out of gas, Christian Danner would never run out of girls. Bake loosely covered for 30 minutes at gas mark 6, then remove foil and allow to brown for a further 15 minutes. The Ligiers, having done well in Rio, were looking purposeful. The Brabhams, however, mysteriously lacked traction at the back end. Patrese had a lot to say in sign language about what the car wouldn't do when he wanted it to and did when he didn't. Gordon Murray was trying to figure out why the huge power of the BMW gave his new masterpiece no more poke than a moped. Senna, instead of doing his by now standard trick of snatching pole position at the last minute on the second day, snatched it on the first day. So the top of the grid once again featured the already familiar lineup. At the start, Senna led away with the field packed up so tight behind him that there wasn't room for the front wing of Fabi's Benetton, which went up in the air, luckily without coming down again in anybody's lap. Senna pressed on, followed by Piquet and Mansell in a Williams Honda each, and then Rosberg and Prost in the McLarens. This looked neat. Less well organized was the collision between Palmer's Zaxpeed and Jones's Lola. Palmer got going again while Jones sat there wondering whether retirement had really been all that much less boring than what he was doing now. On they swept, with Rosberg now ahead of Mansell. So it was Piquet, Rosberg, Mansell, Prost, except that Senna was still out in front. Then Prost got ahead of Mansell, who, worried about his fuel readout, sank back to 5th. The 2 Ferraris were waltzing together until Johansson, with sudden brake failure, tried a fancy reverse turn off the back foot. Mansell, happier now about his fuel consumption, began to bulldog his way back into the action. First of all, he took Prost, thereby becoming 4th. Then he took Rosberg, thereby becoming 3rd. Senna was still out ahead, but was no doubt aware that behind him one of the Williams Hondas had been replaced by the other. Mansell now showed how much he was overawed by Piquet. Not at all. He went past and was now running 2nd. All fired up now, Mansell closed up behind Senna with the clear intention of getting past, which would be sweet revenge for Rio. As the two of them came up to lap Brundle's Tyrrell, Mansell went past into top spot. Piquet's Williams was feeling a bit left out by all this. Finally it succumbed to engine failure. As he stopped for new wheels, Rosberg's fuel readout said that he'd been spendthrift with the boost. There was much dark frowning at the Finn, who said among other things that the fuel readout was faulty. Senna was now right back up behind Mansell, with Prost right back up behind Senna, who was pushing hard. Senna got out of the sandwich and into the lead. Prost also went past Mansell, who was several laps overdue for a change of wheels, a miscalculation. Mansell finally came in to be reshod. Cool enough to remember about wiping the crushed bugs off his visor, he already looked awfully used to being up there near or at the front. With fresh rubber, Mansell closed on Prost. Senna hurtled on. Senna, who hadn't stopped for tyres, was still out in front as the end approached, but Mansell, having passed Prost, was now second and getting closer to Senna all the time. Due to a problem with the official clock, the finish line had been moved 80 yards back from the starting line. If the finish line had been left where it was, Mansell would probably have won the race. As things were, Senna won by a whisker in the closest Grand Prix final for years. Senna was so moved by his victory that he spoke.
I saw him coming very quick, and I realized he had stopped and had new tires, and I had no tires at all, and so I had to really push with no grip. I had to really play around and slide around to try to keep some good speed, and then it was very dangerous. I nearly lost the car, maybe 2 laps from the end in one corner. The car went sideways, sideways, sideways. I thought I lost, and then it came back.
Mansell in defeat was generous to Senna.
No, I mean, when you are leading the race, you are entitled to try and hold the next person up. I think he drove very, very well today, and he didn't shut the door on me, and as you could see at the finishing line, I was right alongside, and I think it was so close. I think they should give us 7.5 points each.
Sherry being unsprayable, it was a dry podium. San Marino is a way for the Italians to have 2 Grand Prix races every year. Nobody begrudges them this because they are so completely car crazy. Into Imola flocked the tifosi, confident that God would be on their side and all the cars except Ferrari would fall to pieces. Fans who couldn't get a ride walked. Some of them tried to walk on water. The only voice they wanted to hear belonged to Alboreto. How did he think the car was going?
A little bit better. We have still 4 cars quicker than us, but there is a little improvement compared to the last race, and we are happy.
He then set off to prove to the tifosi that he was their worthy representative and therefore should not be lynched if he didn't win. De Angelis, however, found that even practice was too great a strain on the 2-dimensional Brabham, whose disadvantages included a reduced amount of advertising space. Nevertheless, the clothes designer Giorgio Armani had been persuaded to purchase some of the Brabham's restricted display area. For Williams Honda, Piquet was once again going all out. The same applied to Mansell. But Senna in the Lotus Renault once again showed that for qualifying at least, he had even more urge under his foot than Piquet or Mansell. The same might have applied to the gallant Dumfries, but he was starting with a disadvantage. Gerard Ducarouge had really designed the car around Senna. Still, Dumfries' friend Andrew Ridgely of Wham was consolingly present, and his friend's friend, the fashion model Donia, was there too. Another new arrival was the much heralded Ford engine for the Lola. For Alan Jones, this sounded like deliverance. He was very calm, cool, relaxed and philosophical at this stage.
Yeah, well, so far I'm very happy with the reliability. We've only had the one engine in this whole time, and we're now just changing it for the race tomorrow. So reliability-wise, it's been fantastic. We could probably do with a little bit more horsepower, but that'll come, no doubt.
As for Prost, he was looking so far ahead that it almost sounded like whistling in the dark, unless you remember that he was the best tactical brain in the sport.
I think everything's going to be very good in the second part of the season. If I can get some points, the first part of the season, I still get a chance to be world champion this year.
Imola being essentially an economy run, away they went in a stately manner, with pole sitter Senna in the lead. But Piquet got beside Senna and then ahead. Nannini in the Minardi collided with Lafitte's Ligier and parked with a cocked-up wheel. While Piquet raced away ahead, Senna held up the McLarens, who in turn were ahead of Mansell. Prost and Rosberg queued up to get past Senna. Prost was the first to manage it. Then Rosberg got past him too. Mansell called into the pits with Dickey Electronics, but later rejoined the race. Rosberg was not to find the McLaren user-friendly until halfway through the season, but he went after Prost anyway, overtook him, and went into second spot. Meanwhile, Senna was being dogged by Alboreto, and one of his rear wheel bearings was running hot. Alboreto went past Senna into fourth place as the Lotus Renault's rear end shoveled smoke. Mansell's Williams Honda also contracted smoker's cough and blew up, a rare event. Piquet came in for tyres. This left Rosberg and Prost in the McLarens first and second, numbers 2 and 1 giving it the old 1-2. Piquet got back into the action, but he was now third. Prost gave up trying to get past Rosberg and came in for tyres. Rosberg was driving like a man who had never heard of fuel restrictions. Fuel is a Finnish word for madman. He stopped for tyres a bit longer than Prost, who got back the lead. So it was Prost in front, followed by Rosberg, then Piquet. Back in the pack, the exciting Berger took 6th place from Johansson, while they both came up to lap Brundle, who was in turn lapping Ghinzani, who was not going backwards. Now that every car was a turbo-powered IBM-compatible, computerized CAD-CAM state-of-the-art technological miracle, none of them was really slow. People were wondering how much longer all this speed, power and expense could be allowed to go on. The question became academic for Alboreto, to the deep disappointment of the Tifosi. Rosberg lost 2nd place and every other place when he was finally reminded of the fuel restrictions by his wheels ceasing to turn. The little needle reading 0 and the hollow noise from the petrol tank had failed to convey this message. Patresi's Brabham then ran out of fuel too. This was serious. Even Prost's car was getting thirsty. He wagged the McLaren from side to side in order to wash the dregs into the pipes. In the McLaren pit, Ron Dennis appealed to heaven. The plea was answered. Prost trickled across the line, powered by prayer. Prost either punched the air for victory or said kill blag to the fuel rules. It was hard to tell. Ron Dennis hugged Mr. Auger of TAG, who paid for the McLaren's smart engine, although luckily Prost himself had been even smarter.
I was very surprised. I was running out of fuel 3 or 4 corners before the end, because I said the computer showed me 3 liters advance. But at this time I said, shit, again, I'm going to lose this Grand Prix. I lost last year for 2 kilos less. And about fuel, that's why, you know, I was always against this regulation, because you can lose or win because 1 liter or half liter. But it's I was lucky today, and I think it's good for me.
But not even the fuel ration hampers the champers. As they say nowadays with increasing frequency, the Monaco Grand Prix makes a nice change from Grand Prix racing. A lot of boats backed up to the circuit in order to show how well their owners had done by buying cheap and selling dear. Some of the women look very dear indeed. On one of the yachts sat Mrs. Ronnie Peterson and John Watson, who was clearly enjoying life, but equally clearly would have liked something to drive. Down on the track with the poor people, I watched the cars cope with the problem of fitting about 1,000 horsepower each onto a mini golf course. The Brabham was still down on usable power, but Bernie had a word in Riccardo's ear. Patrese went out and got 5th place on the grid, the new car's best starting position yet. De Angelis, however, only just scraped through as a qualifier. Jonesy had a new sticker on his helmet indicating a tidal wave of Foster's cash. In the Williams pit, Piquet and Mansell practiced brotherly love, while each strove to outdo the other in cars that uncharacteristically disintegrated every hour on the hour. At McLaren, Prost got the pole, seemingly without effort. On the grid, Prost and Mansell were beside each other, with Senna and Alboreto 3rd and 4th. Prost led away, followed by Senna, Mansell, Piquet, Alboreto and Berger. But the interesting news was that Rosberg came up from 9th and went past Berger into 5th position. At Monaco, this is a lot of places to gain in one whole race, let alone one lap. If the era of extravagant drivers like Rosberg was now passing, it seemed a terrible pity. Jones's Lola and Streff's Tyrrell came into contact at Tabac. Facing into the traffic, Jones waved delightedly at passing cars who would be forced to continue the race. Palmer's Zack-speed almost wiped out a Marshall. Jones headed back to the hotel to crack a tinny and watch the race on television. The Brabham's lack of employable grunts seeming to matter less here, Patrese took Berger's Benetton for 6th place. Rosberg, the old street fighter, harried Alboreto's Ferrari, which was in 4th place. In brilliant form, with plenty of curbs to bounce off, Rosberg caught up and squeezed by. Curb is a Finnish word for guts. Mansell's tyres were off, and after stopping to change them, he was down from 3rd to 5th. Rosberg, having inherited 3rd place from Mansell, now had Senna in his sights. Rosberg tracked Senna around the hotels and eventually caught him, but then had to stop for tyres. So Prost was still in the lead. After his pit stop, Rosberg closed up on Alboreto all over again. He went past in almost the same spot as before, which looked like a replay. Prost now stopped for tyres. This let Senna into the lead. Alboreto's Ferrari gave up, giving all the Italians present a chance to catch an early train. Senna now had Prost in his mirrors and a worn set of tyres with which to do not enough about it. Senna did his formidable best, but Prost had all the grip. The Brazilian said goodbye and went in to get some new rubber of his own. Prost now had the lead, which he would keep until the flag. Senna's Lotus sat up on the jacks while his chances drained away. Prost's McLaren hummed calmly on. Less calmly, but fun to watch, Rosberg made it 1-2 for McLaren, just the way things used to be. Senna had to be content with 3rd. So the race was running out in good order. Unless something went wrong, it was all over. It went wrong for Patrick Tambay, whose Lola did a barrel roll at head height and returned to earth in the form of junk, from which Tombe unbelievably emerged intact. He was lucky not to go over the barrier and down to one of the seafront bars, where he would have been offered a drink, but might have had trouble holding it steady. Here was a reminder that even Monaco is a Grand Prix race, and that the grand prize can carry a big price. Prost crossed the line first, and yet another display of silk line driving. Jackie Ickx waved the flag, no doubt wondering why it had not rained this year. And if you wonder where Piquet was, he was down at 7th, off form and out of the points. On the dais, Rosberg spurted the bubbly all over one of the palace guards, for whom this must have constituted the biggest danger he would ever be called upon to face. A quarter of the way through the season, Prost was on top of the championship and Mansell was only 5th. Prost climbed into a boat and departed for a mysterious rendezvous. He had powerful friends in Monaco. For the Brabham team, testing the new car at the Paul Ricard circuit in France, a tough season became tragic when Elio De Angelis crashed and died. Unable to help being handsome and rich, he made up for it by being a wonderful driver as well, as his future career would surely have proved further if the law of averages had not picked him to make itself felt. Everyone in the Grand Prix circus knows that a racing driver chooses his life on the understanding that death might choose him, but it still hurts when it happens. And as the day for the Belgian Grand Prix approached, the gloom was hard to shake. Despite all the safety improvements in recent years, cars so powerful can't be as safe as your saloon, especially when the turbo catches fire, as Fabi's did while he was busy qualifying on the first day at Spa. But Berger in the other Benetton was quickest on the first day. He found the pit area full of new friends. When the lovely Donia turned up again, everyone cheered up except Dennis Jenkinson. She clearly fancied him, but Jenks is no cradle snatcher. On the second day of practice, Piquet went even quicker than Berger and got the pole.
Well, Senna been doing all the pole positions so far and all the quick circuits. I don't know why he didn't went very quick. I was expecting him today come very quick.
So I wasn't very lucky, and I missed my first pole position. And the shit thing is, okay, first row is okay, but the shit thing is I would need the Vespa, so I have to try again next race.
There was another shit sing for Berger at the start. Senna came around from behind him and nudged him towards Prost, creating a small traffic jam to which Fabi and the other Benetton added his contribution. Rosberg took a look, turned around and went back the other way. Most of them slowly got going again, but meanwhile Piquet was racing away from Senna as they both tried to race away from everybody. The rest of the field were not to be ditched so easily. Piquet and Senna soon found Mansell close behind them, followed by Johansson's Ferrari and Dumfries in the other Lotus. Berger was back in the running, but Prost's front wing, damaged by the Chantette, was drooping like a moustache that had been slept on. The leaders ran on, evenly spaced and at high speed. Prost came in for a nose job. As Piquet led, his teammate Mansell was finding the high-speed Spa circuit very enjoyable and celebrated by going past Senna into 4th place. Mansell was having so much fun, he was having too much fun. He hopped the curb at the bus stop chicane and did a pirouette that dropped him back to 4th. With uncharacteristic decorum, Rosberg headed for the slip road and retired, probably because of nicotine starvation. They had still not given him a helmet with a little hole in it. Piquet was still leading. Mansell, the British bulldog, was now eager to retrieve the bone he had dropped while dazzled by the spinning scenery. He took back 3rd place from Johansson. Piquet retired with a blown engine. This left Senna in the lead. But Senna soon had another Williams Honda to worry about, driven by Mansell. Prost's newly nosed McLaren was moving up all the time. He went past Sura's Arrows into 11th spot. The pressure on Senna temporarily eased when Mansell stopped for tyres, dropping him from second to third behind Johansson. But soon Senna had to stop for the same reason, dropping him from first to third behind Mansell. Senna went off after Mansell at a rousing clip, arriving on the track out of the pit lane just in time for Mansell to gallop by. But Johansson now led, a stirring sight which was probably communicated immediately by telephone to Commendatore Enzo Ferrari at Maranello. Johansson came in to be treated by an inspired pit crew to the fastest ever recorded pit stop, about a second less than the time shown by our on-screen clock, but it still cost him 3 places. Prost was still moving up. He lapped Berger, of whom he had seen more than enough that day already. In the closing stages, Johansson on fresh tyres came up behind Alboreto, who hadn't stopped at all. Ferraris were third and fourth. Johansson would no doubt have liked to keep that arrangement, but reversed the personnel. A pit signal, however, told both of them to ease off the boost and keep things dignified. After you, Michele. Grazie, Stefan. Mark Sura shed a wheel on the way into the pits so as to emphasize that there was something wrong with his arrows. Mansell came home the winner, with the lap Streff bobbing in his wake. Mansell had now overtaken Piquet in the World Championship, but Senna, by finishing the race second, now led in total points. Johansson did his best to stay behind Alboreto, but his foot slipped and he came out ahead. Unseen by our camera and barely creeping onto the scoreboard, Prost had climbed all the way up from nowhere to 6th. But Mansell had the limelight.
I'm sorry it took so long, Frank, but we've cracked it this year already.
And so, as if to bear out Sigmund Freud's theories about the infantile impulse at the root of all endeavour, the boys lined up again to see how far they could squirt. Across the Atlantic went the Grand Prix circus to the Gilles Villeneuve circuit at Montreal. At Brabham, Derek Warwick, currently driving for Jaguar at the very top of sports car racing, was brought in to fill De Angelis's sadly empty chair. Warwick had nice things to say about the car, initially anyway.
Driving endurance, you know, the cars are much heavier, much slower under braking, so it's completely different. And then this afternoon in qualifying, I mean, it was just, with the power of the BMW, it was just amazing, fantastic.
The other big story was Christian Danner's block move to Arrows, where Sura's seat had become empty after a bad rally accident. Ozella didn't want to let Danner go. There was a lot of strained laughter on the subject, but it was a change for Danner to be torn limb from limb by men. Journalists who wore summer clothes were making a big mistake. Because it rained like stink, Senna slowed down by about 1 mile per hour. Fabi's Benetton slid along in high-speed contact with the pit wall, demolishing all the pit signal boards, slicing off its own nose and rearranging the front suspension. Then it crushed its rear end against the opposite wall and evened everything out. Blessing the miracle of the modern laminated carbon fiber monocoque module, Fabi stepped out of a car dramatically shorter than it had been only a few seconds before. As he steamed on for the pole, Mansell's moustache was matched by his car when a nifty pair of shockwaves formed in the wet air at each end of his flying wing. During the Sunday morning warm-up, Tombe had another crash in his Lola, and this time he hurt his leg so badly that he couldn't race. This was tough on Tombe, but once again you couldn't help wondering how much worse it would have been in those days, not long ago, when the cockpit used to crumple if you looked at it. Mansell had dominated practice, and he now started the race as if he intended to dominate that as well, an idea that Senna liked little and Piquet not at all. The McLarens had also done well in practice and were keen to prove that the race would not be a Williams-Honda benefit. Prost soon got past Piquet, but like everybody else, he found himself held up by Senna, who materially aided Mansell's getaway by monopolizing the racing line, thereby endearing himself even further to his fellow practitioners. If this had been American football, Mansell would have been in the happy position of a running back who has his blocking done for him by a member of the opposing team. Prost pushed Senna, but it was like hammering with your fists on the back of a departing bus whose doors refused to open. Rosberg felt the same way about Piquet, but eventually he squeezed by. Senna had held Prost up to the point where Rosberg could get a shot at his own teammate if he timed it right. Rosberg locked up a brake trying to get an inside slot that didn't exist. Somehow contriving to ignore Rosberg's hot cigarette-stained breath on his neck, Prost concentrated on the problem of getting past Senna, finally presenting him with the choice of either giving way or leaving the room. Apparently depressed by this, Senna dropped 4 places, with Prost, Rosberg, Piquet and Arnoux Ligier all ahead of him. And Mansell was way up ahead of all of them. Rosberg got past Prost into second place. Liking the sensation of getting in front of people, Rosberg went past Mansell into the lead. Mansell took a squint at his fuel readout and let him go. Rosberg, who either didn't have a fuel gauge or didn't know where it was on the dashboard, went. But when Rosberg came up to lap Alan Jones's Lola, he left a hole in which Mansell could see the possibility of profit at low cost. Smoothly, Mansell nipped back through the window into the front parlour. Rosberg stopped for new wheels, dropping from second to fourth. Mansell took his turn in the pits and dropped from first to second, leaving Prost in the lead. Prost came in expecting to drop from first place to second or maybe third, but his new left rear wheel stuck on a hot axle stub and he went back out fifth. So it was Mansell's Williams Honda out in front, followed by his teammate Piquet, and then Rosberg in the first of the McLarens. Piquet made his scheduled pit stop and dropped from second to fourth. Back out on the track with fresh wheels, Piquet regained third spot from Prost in no uncertain manner. Lowering the dove-like shoe while cranking up the boost, the hastening Piquet took second spot from Rosberg. Clearly Piquet's real target was Mansell, who was showing a disconcerting ability to keep command. Prost took third place from Rosberg, who was running out of fuel and waved him by, while Piquet powered on ahead of them in search of Mansell's distant sparks and exhaust flames. But Piquet had overcooked his tyres, which had broken out in blisters and needed to be replaced in a pit stop that dropped him back to fourth. 6 slicks. Doing it all over again, Piquet raced past Rosberg back into third place, but his increasingly authoritative colleague Mansell was a long way up ahead. Mansell finished the race the way he had started it, in first place. He had dominated the meeting from the first practice to the final flag. Prost had unobtrusively managed to rise above his bad luck into second place. Piquet had tried his best and ended up third, which no doubt made him secretly annoyed, but on the winner's dais, Piquet conquered his peak and showered his triumphant teammate with affection. Bernie laid on a fleet of trucks into which the Grand Prix circus packed itself for the border crossing to Detroit. Grand Prix racing has on many occasions been declared clinically deceased in the United States, but Detroit for one doesn't think so. Tom Bay was present in the Lola pit, but strictly as a spectator since he could barely walk. Alan Jones would not be driving alone, however, because Tom Bay's empty seat would be filled by Eddie Cheever, back for one race only at this address. His way at last cleared to join the Arrows team, Christian Danner posed for rare footage showing him unaccompanied by females. Martin Brundle had brought Mrs. Brundle to help set him up for the bumpy circuit. Senna once again went all out for the pole. Mansell did his best not to let the Brazilian get a swelled head, but when Senna's time was signalled to Prost, he couldn't believe it. But even Senna found the circuit a bit of a sweat.
I think Detroit is not the best circuit because it's too bumpy and you run between the walls. It's good to be on pole here, but the race is going to be very hard, tough, long race, and I hope we can have a good fight, a clear fight, and a good show for all the public.
At the green light, Senna and Mansell did their by now standard sprint for the first corner, with Senna narrowly arriving first. Arnoux in one of the promising Ligiers lay third, followed by Piquet, Johansson and Prost. By the end of lap 3, Mansell was bumping along in the lead, followed by Senna, Arnoux, Piquet, Johansson, Prost, Lafitte and everybody else, all going up and down like a caterpillar over corrugated iron. But Senna, not content to run second, turned up the volume and took the lead back from Mansell, whose back brakes were playing up. Having seen Senna do it, Arnoux got the same idea and nerved himself up to get the Ligier past the Williams Honda. He accomplished this feat as they swept along the riverfront. But Senna was now right out on his own, until he got a puncture and had to come in for an early pit stop. Arnoux was now in the lead, but found himself challenged by his teammate Lafitte, two Ligiers at it hammer and tongs. To the delight of his many admirers, Lafitte kept the lead no matter what was happening behind him, and a lot was, because although Arnoux dropped back, he held up Mansell, Prost, Piquet and Senna. Piquet went past Prost, but Mansell was still stuck behind Arnoux. Senna got past Prost. Arnoux removed himself by coming in for tyres. Piquet shoved his way past Mansell. And so did Senna. Piquet drew a bead on Lafitte and in due course went past him into the lead. Next, it was Senna's turn. Lafitte needed new tyres. So did Piquet, but he didn't need a jammed right wheel, which cost him precious moments and gave Senna a longer lead. Senna came in for a pit stop that turned out to be just perfect, a real race winner, because he went out again without losing the lead. Piquet, perhaps a trifle peeved, took it out on the riverfront wall. Piquet's wrecked car was left on the track long enough for Arnoux to come around and hit it, leaving the marshals with 2 cars to remove. Senna, the Lotus Renault functioning like a watch for once, rushed on towards victory. Lafitte, who must have been feeling that all was coming right again at last, took back second place from Prost. Senna has so great a gift and the Lotus so much power that a win ought to have looked normal, but it seemed rare enough to be remarkable. Perhaps we would have to get used to it. Senna, Prince Andrew, the cameraman, but what the hell, it was his day. Back across the pond to France. Our cameramen took their lenses down to the beach for testing. Our cameras seemed to be working normally, so it was time to follow the signs to the Paul Ricard circuit, which had been shortened after De Angelis' accident. Bernie tried out a new scooter to see if Patrese or Warwick could do better on one of those. Mansell in the Williams Honda was second fastest in practice, but Senna was fastest, and now he knew this wasn't necessarily the prelude to his losing the race. On his home turf, Jean-Marie Balestre was all charm as he greeted the Brazilian superstar. Balestre removed his shades so as to give our camera the full benefit of his charisma. At the start, Alboreto went exactly nowhere. The first corner was like the Paris Périphérique at rush hour. Mansell led through the twisty bit with Dumfries' Lotus up to 6th. The slave was keen to prove that he was a free man. Senna hurried to stay in touch with Mansell. Behind Senna came Arnoux, Berger, Prost, Piquet, Dumfries and Rosberg. With some impatience, Rosberg saw the new boy Dumfries off. De Cesaris blew a turbo, but wittily managed to spray oil over a large section of the track before coming to rest. Prost ducked out of Berger's slipstream, outbraked him and got by. Mansell only twitched onto Cesaris' oil slick, but Senna lost contact with the macadam and sideswiped the rubber-padded Armco, the carbon fiber tub once again saving a precious pair of legs. Elsewhere at the same moment, Boutsen's arrows shed some skin, but he was not hurt. Nor was Senna, just disgusted. At the standard overtaking point, Rosberg went past Berger into 4th place. Berger, having head-butted a back marker, came in for a new nose. As Mansell ran on ahead, Prost passed Arnoux for 2nd place. Mansell gave Prost the lead when he made his 2nd stop for tyres. Dumfries was still running a highly respectable 6th when Hugh Brotengatter, now driving for Zakspeed, tried to hump his right rear wheel. Dumfries later got going again after some repair work at the pits, but the Zakspeed had acquired a ground effect that nothing could cure. Prost did a quick pit stop, but Mansell went back into the lead. Back in the race in second spot, Prost had Piquet behind him, masked by Palmer's lap Zach speed. But when Piquet pulled out to pass Palmer, the hectic Rosberg pulled out to pass Piquet, and so went into third place. Streff's Tyrrell cooked up in a big way, but much more interesting than the fire was the time needed to put it out. Eventually, 3 marshals and a fire truck played out a comic epic around the edge of the conflagration. Mansell made his second stop for tyres, giving Prost back the lead. But Mansell had it all in hand. Either Prost must come in too, or stay out on threadbare wheels. Prost did the second thing, and Mansell went back to being first. Dumfries, still gallantly fighting his losing battle in a team where even the Portaloo was set up for Senna, exchanged 10th place for some fire damage which the marshals made worse with foam. Piquet, who would have liked to be ahead of Mansell, or failing that a lot closer behind him than he now was, drew some consolation when he got past Rosberg into third place, with the lap Patrese watching it all in his low-slung mirrors. Mansell won, giving a further boost to his self-confidence, all of which he was going to need, because the press back home was now calling him the British Hope, a kiss of death label under whose weight many another hot British prospect has staggered to defeat. Was he looking forward to the British Grand Prix?
Oh, it's just fantastic to go and drive in front of your home country and your home crowd. And I think for all the English drivers in Formula One, Jonathan, Derek, Martin, myself, I mean, it'll just be very good for all of us.
Prost was on top of the championship points, but Mansell was only 1 point away, with Senna a close third. Piquet was fourth and feeling a bit nettled, mainly about Mansell. In the Constructors' Championship, Williams-Honda was out ahead of McLaren, but it wasn't over yet. The Formula One season that was heading towards Adelaide was barely half done. The drivers, the teams, and the whole Grand Prix circus had no time to rest. But you have. Take a breath, take your time, before the engines howl again. The 1986 Formula One season, the most exciting in years, was wide open until the end. In the last race, there were still 3 men in contention. It would all end here in Adelaide, but halfway through the season, there was still a long way to go. Thousands of miles on the track, tens of thousands in the air, as the Grand Prix circus moved on. It moved on to Brands Hatch, where Bernie Eccleston arrived in a war-surplus B-17 after bombing Ballestri's bunker in France. The new flat car still declining to come right, Brabham had wheeled last year's model out of oblivion. Why?
We've experienced troubles with this 55 and we're trying to evaluate what, if any, the problems are. So we thought we'd drag this thing out the Donington Museum, fire it up and see what happens. So that's what we're doing.
Did you have much trouble collecting all the parts for it?
We found them littered all over the place and eventually we got enough together.
But the old car was even slower than the new car. It wasn't just the Williams team that smiled when father figure Frank Williams proved he was on the mend by putting in a personal appearance. He was applauded to the echo, even by people who were getting sick of watching his cars disappear into the distance. Girl photographers who had been told there was a chance of meeting Christian Danner came from all over Europe. In the McLaren pit, I was confronted with a major and startling technological innovation. For the British Grand Prix, Marlboro would be spelled M-C-L-A-R-E-N. Senna's Lotus wasn't advertising cigarettes either, nor for once did Senna get the pole, although he tried hard. Piquet got it instead. In Mansell's pit, I was glad to see that his helmet was still globular, instead of crushed flat by the burden of being called the British Hope, the Isle of Man Iron Man, and the fastest moustache since Errol Flynn. Friends, relatives and well-wishers had gathered in some numbers. It was hoped that the last Grand Prix at Brands Hatch would see the first British winning driver in 10 years. Piquet got the pole, but Mansell started in a second spot that looked strategically promising until all those fine hopes seemed to crumble along with his drive shaft. This paled, however, beside Boutsen's excursion into the Armco, from which he rebounded to the consternation of every car behind him. Some of the cars never got moving again, but all the drivers were okay except one, Lafitte. Jonathan Palmer, a doctor, commendably went to help Lafitte, who could move a hand but not his legs. In one of those correct, prompt and efficiently carried out decisions which make Brands such a relief after circuits where they can't put out a fire until it's almost over, the race was stopped. It would be at least half an hour before it could restart. Mansell is too nice a man to have been happy in the middle of Lafitte's anguish, but the fact was that he had been given a second chance, because before the race started again there would be time to take over Piquet's spare car. The front of Lafitte's car gave a persuasive hint that his injuries were not light. Piquet took it as easy as an old hand can when the law of averages bangs its gavel. Lafitte was taken to hospital with smashed legs. Decently quiet, the crowd could be forgiven for surmising that Lafitte's ill wind had blown Nigel good. At the restart, the now wide-awake Piquet scorched off into the lead with renewed ferocity, determined to put Mansell in his place, which the Brazilian regarded as being second at the very most. The South American press had been saying that the Williams-Honda team was now favouring Mansell, and it is possible that Piquet had not only read this, but believed it. Anyway, Piquet was in a bad mood, which is not good for the judgment. Mansell had Berger's Benetton, Senna's Lotus and both McLarens after him, but he was determined to drive his own race and showed no signs of panic even when Berger took second spot. Fabi and the other Benetton tried to get past Prost, but the Frenchman wasn't having any. They were all squeezed up at the front and ready to swap if anything popped. The Benetton BMW was fast, but the Williams Honda had that vital notch of boost in reserve. Without bending anything except Berger's ego, Mansell took second place back and set off after Piquet. Stymied by a broken gearbox, Rosberg climbed out to smoke an early Marlboro. Sorry, McLaren. Mansell was breathing down Piquet's neck. It isn't like the Brazilian to lose his nerve, but he might have lost his temper. He might even have missed a gear. Anyway, the local boy went by into first place. Stopping to change wheels, Senna could do nothing about his gear stick, which sometimes selected third and sometimes BBC 2. A lap later, he retired. Piquet's crew changed the wheels quickly enough to keep him in second place. Sliding into the same pit like a hot bunking sailor into a recently vacated hammock, Mansell was off the jacks and away again just fast enough to stay ahead of Piquet in first place. Arriving on the scene just after Mansell left the pits, Piquet went around the lap stref and up the hill like a burglar, hoping to catch Mansell before the British Hope's new tyres played themselves in. Beneath the British helmet, his upper lip stiff, his teeth gritted and his moustache bristling even though squashed flat by his balaclava, Mansell had nothing to ward Piquet off with except sheer skill. Piquet had another chance to nail Mansell between paddock and Druids, but a lap-back marker got in the way. Patrese in the old model Brabham had got quite near the finish before conking out, so Bernie and Gordon had something to evaluate. Mansell's tyres warmed up just soon enough for him to keep Piquet at sword's length. For the crucial few laps it took Piquet to decide what the hell, it wasn't Rio. Who ever heard of Brands Hatch? Just quietly, as always, Prost made a second pit stop from which he continued into a useful third position. He had lost top spot in the World Championship, but not by as much as he might have, and the future still stretched ahead. For the present, though, Mansell had arrived. Mansell had not only won on his home ground, he was leading the World Championship for the first time. And he had done all this in a car borrowed from Piquet, who was less than thrilled, or so the delighted press strove to have the world believe. They gave Nigel a really nice vase. The German Grand Prix took place at Hockenheim, a super-fast circuit which reminds the drivers why they got into the sport in the first place, in order to run along the ground very quickly. And in Dana's case, to meet a lot of pretty girls. Philippe Alliot sat in for the injured Lafitte at Ligier, to whom it was rumoured that Renault would not be supplying engines next year. Rumours were rife. As a beautiful spy sketched the McLaren's tag Porsche engine, scuttlebutt had it that the car's star designer John Barnard might go to Ferrari, that Mansell might go to Ferrari, and even absurdly that Ferrari might go to, of all places, England, and be built there. Bernie Eccleston, the only man in Formula One who knows everything for sure, was everywhere, including the Ferrari pit. He had a word through team manager Piccinini's right earplug. Was he planning to buy Ferrari as well? When the Ferraris went past the McLaren pit, John Barnard studiously ignored them, like a guilty lover. Honda held a press conference announcing that its engines would go not only to Williams next year, but to Lotus as well, who would be encouraged to accept a Japanese #2 driver along with the spare parts. Senna would be glad to get the Honda power plant, which, while slightly less rip-snorting than the Renault, was more robust. But for the brave Dumfries, it spelled goodbye in Japanese. Rosberg would also say goodbye, but voluntarily. The new technology had finally bored him out of the game. This was the last year he would race against Alboreto and all the others.
It's very difficult to imagine life without motorsport, so without actually driving. So it's impossible to say how it's going to be. When you've been racing for 22 years, you don't know life without driving. So therefore to say it's going to be great is nonsense. I don't know how it's going to be. So it might well be I'm driving in 3 years again when I get bored. But that's not the intention. The intention is to move into other things, get the fascination out of them, and definitely enjoy the friends and atmosphere of Formula One in working with other things.
But if Rosberg was going out, it would be with a bang. He snatched the pole from Prost, so the McLarens were on the grid 1 and 2. At the green light, however, Senna got clever with the clutch and stuck the Lotus between the McLarens, as Johansson's Ferrari took an inadvisable shortcut over the front right wheel of Alliot's Ligier, rammed Fabi's Benetton and forced Tombé's Lola onto the grass. Both the Lola and the Ferrari continued, but Fabi's Benetton was obliged to advertise sportswear from the stationary position. Oblivious to all this, Senna raced on in the lead. Then Berger, Rosberg, Piquet, Prost, Mansell and, good heavens, Patrese Brabham. With Senna in charge, the top three moved on in good order. But Rosberg was once again feeling his oats. When they came back into view, Rosberg was in front. While Rosberg stretched his lead, Piquet drew a bead on Berger. Behind Piquet came Prost, Mansell and Alboreto. Rosberg still led, but Piquet had got by Berger into third place behind Senna. Piquet was now very hot on the subject of Senna. Piquet slipstreamed Senna, ducked out and forced his fellow Brazilian to back down by braking early, an act of submission which Piquet calls opening the legs. Senna opens the legs with great reluctance. Berger's Benetton had been going well until its electrics played up. Up at the front, Rosberg found himself harried by Piquet. Rosberg opens the legs as well, and Piquet went by into first place. Mansell went through the chicane ahead of Alboreto, but hopped the curb and took an excursion through the dirt. Piquet arrived early for a pit stop when they were expecting Mansell. The crew was nonplussed only for an extra couple of seconds, but Piquet dropped from first to fourth. Rosberg also stopped for tyres. And so did Prost. Piquet got the lead back from Rosberg. Piquet stopped again because they had given him Mansell's tyres on the last visit and he wanted his own. This time he dropped from first to third. At his standard overtaking point, Piquet recovered second place from Prost. Piquet recovered first place from Rosberg by driving around him in a fashion on which Rosberg thought he had the copyright. Two laps from the end, Senna suddenly closed on the McLaren. On his last lap, Senna was in second place in front of Rosberg and Prost. Prost had little fuel left, but Rosberg had none at all. So Piquet won the race. Senna, with only a few drops left, weaved home like someone who had had a drop too many. Prost is a man of great patience, but the fuel rules were testing it to the limit. He tried pushing, but gave up. Piquet had enough fuel left to do a victory lap and give Rosberg a lift home. So Mansell, who might have finished fifth if the McLaren's engines had been a bit less greedy, was up on the podium in the champagne squirting contest, and that much closer to the World Championship. The Hungarian Grand Prix was the first World Championship race ever held behind the Iron Curtain. The Hungarians spared no expense. Several impressive buildings have been put up around the circuit. The timing box, Monsieur Ballestri's parking space, the press tent. The Hungaroring was immaculately prepared. West Zakspeed paid tribute by changing the name of one of their cars. Once again, Bernie had fixed everything.
I think that they think it's a good public relations exercise and the amount of exposure they're going to get, obviously, throughout the world is incredible. So it shows the rest of the world what it's like in the Eastern Bloc.
The Eastern Bloc turned up in force. The ticket seller didn't look like a Marxist. Where does she carry her party card, you might ask? Hungarian radio had been telling the girls that there was a chance of fraternizing with Christian Danner. They came flocking in from the potato factories. James Hunt arrived on foot, having been banned from all airlines due to his corrosive effect on the carpets. Niki Lauda was there. Hunt would never have tried a stunt like that on his airline. Mansell qualified fourth. Prost third. Piquet was second. And Senna, after more spins than ever before in his whole career, once again got the pole.
The track is very safe, so you know if most of the place. If you have a spin, you have runoff areas, so you try. And as it is very slippery, that means when you go just a bit over the limit, you are gone. You cannot recover from it, so the consequence of it is a spin. And so in 3 days I had 5 spins, which is a lot.
A communist in a capitalist hat. Bernie breaks down all barriers. From the jump, Senna was well away, with Mansell and Piquet after him. According to the usual script, the Williams Hondas should have been followed by the McLarens and perhaps the Ligiers or Benettons, but this time the Lolas were well up, with Tombe fourth and Jones sixth. Either the new engine was making its presence felt, or the slow track suited the chassis. As Senna hustled on, Piquet was lining up to pass Mansell. Piquet had a new differential, of whose virtues, so the story later went, he had neglected to inform his colleague. Piquet was an old hand who knew a lot of tricks about setting up a car, but not telling his teammate about them would have been a new trick. Prost got past Tombe into fourth position. Senna was still ahead, but he could see Piquet in his mirrors. Patresi's low car climbed the low curb and got stuck there with even less rear-end traction than usual. Piquet now had Senna lined up, and with the extra handful of boost permitted to him by the Honda's excellent fuel management, he simply uprated himself and swept grandly by. Fabi tried the same thing with Alboreto, but he locked up at least 2 brakes and hit the dirt. Prost had a pit stop 8 laps long because of a major malfunction in the electronics. Rosberg tried to come in, but they waved him out again. Toilet occupied. Piquet motored on. His routine tyre stop dropped him to second place behind Senna. Senna motored on. Senna's routine tyre stop was nothing dazzling, but it let him keep the lead. Piquet, however, still had power in reserve. Once again, he prepared to cruise by. But Piquet had rather overdone the late braking. Senna dived inside and Piquet had to start again. Two laps later, Piquet varied the attack and drew level on the outside. You can see taxi drivers doing this to each other every evening rush hour in Rio, but for the Hungarians it was a new experience. Viva el capitalismo! The same maneuver in slow motion reveals technical details, such as Piquet making the sign of the cross and Senna closing his eyes. Piquet went on to win, which put him in a better mood, although the atmosphere in the Williams team was not calculated to improve when Mansell found out that he might have gone faster if Piquet had shared the facts and info. Senna came home second. This was the 11th race of the year and the first time since Brazil that Prost's name had not been among the top 6. Mansell was up there on the dais in third spot, but there was not much comradely mutual squirting between him and Piquet. Over the hills to Austria, where the Waldheims sing curtly among the Edelweiss. The Österreich-Ring is a very fast circuit on which the drivers can engage top gear for several seconds on end and are thus made very happy. But things were visibly tense between Mansell and Piquet. It should be emphasized, however, that Grand Prix racing is so competitive, it's a wonder the drivers get on at all. Yet mutual respect usually ensures that the needle doesn't get pushed in far before being pulled out again. The Japanese Honda mechanics, to whom Western faces look inscrutable even when not covered with helmets, just got on with it. Over at McLaren, the talk would not die down that John Barnard might go to Ferrari. Ron Dennis was speechless. Princess Stephanie used to be one of Prost's mechanics, but she was here on a freelance basis. Warwick's low-profile Brabham tried to go through the top of the hill instead of over it. This was a drastic way of keeping the Brabham's back end on the ground. The car was one of the fastest through the speed traps, but it would not behave. Warwick's frustration was growing. The spectators then switched their attention from Warwick to Patrese in the other Brabham. Patrese watched his car brew up while a marshal ran back from lunch to get his extinguisher. The fire truck got there on the same day, but only just. It's at long moments like this that drivers miss those wonderful English marshals who collect old copies of motorsport, pester them for autographs, but are there when you need them, instead of after the ashes have grown cool. Gerhard Berger, a prophet honored in his own country, really stirred up the crowd during practice. Yet it was Fabi's Benetton that went even faster than Berger and got the pole. Fabi's family were proud of him, and what a lucky man he was to have one of those marvellous younger brothers who play practical jokes. So it was two Benettons in the front row, a whole new picture. For the first time in 1,000 years, there was no accident at the start. The McLarens chased the Benettons up to the first corner, with both Williams and Senna's Lotus a bit further back. Berger had got clear, but Fabi had no intention of letting him get away, even if this was his home ground. Behind the Benettons, Prost and Rosberg's McLarens sandwiched the Williams Hondas. Senna watched Rosberg warily as the Finn flailed with impatience. Things went on like that for some time, the usual big five up at the front, except that the two Benettons were ahead of them, as if Rosenkrantz and Guildenstern had both appeared on stage dressed as Hamlet and refused to go off again. Fabi tried to swap with Berger going up the hill, but Berger thought otherwise. Behind them, Prost and Mansell were married but dreaming of divorce. Patrese, who had pinched Warwick's car after his own had failed to reach the grid, was out after 2 laps with a blown engine and inched home to a pit where no one was jubilant. Senna came in early with a blistered left front tyre. A little later he came in again and gave up, his engine incurably off song. The left rear suspension of Nannini's Minardi snapped, and he saw a lot of Austria spinning around his head before he plunged into the tall grass and everything went brown and green. Fabi was still pushing his car hard, hoping to get past Berger. He didn't manage it going up the hill, but over the crest he pulled a fast one. Fabi was in front, but the car had taken too much punishment. Berger got the lead back straight away. Fabi went slower and slower and finally retired. Mansell was now of a mind to challenge Prost for second, but it was a long and exciting process. Finally, Prost stopped for tyres, giving second place to Mansell. Berger stopped for tyres, and it was discovered that he had a flat battery, a fault which cost him 2 laps. Mansell now led. Berger just sat there, cursing quietly in the local lingo. Mansell's routine stop for wheels dropped him from first to second. Prost was now the leader. Piquet went out with overheating. Mansell's drive shaft broke and he had to walk home. Tombé's Lola had been running a creditable fourth, but Johansson's Ferrari had been sitting behind it. After a long battle, Johansson got by, just as race leader Prost came back round to remind them of reality by lapping both. Rosberg went out to grass with a glitch in the electronics. Prost won the race. The next man on the same lap was Alboreto, with Johansson in the other Ferrari third, the best-looking result for Maranello in some time. Alan Jones was fourth, so it looked at last as if his car was becoming as serious as he was. Tombé's Lola was also on the board, and Danner had shown that he could get points as well as girls. Prost was on top of the dais, but Mansell was ahead in the championship, nor were Senna and Piquet all that far back. Very interesting. The next stop was Italy, which means Monza, which means the Ferrari fans, by whom Alboreto would be required to do well, or else he would have to leave town wearing Mansell's moustache for a disguise. But in the pit road, it was announced that Alboreto would not be able to drive because he had hurt himself while taking a shower or riding a motorcycle, or both. All Italy was horrified. It seemed too awful to be true, but the car was indeed empty. I checked up to make sure Alboreto was not lying low. Teammate Johansson was distraught at Alboreto's absence. Ron Dennis of McLaren, who were doing well, sympathized with Herbie Blash of Brabham, who weren't. Gerard Ducarouge of Lotus was also full of understanding, but none of this helped Brabham's designer Gordon Murray, who had dreamed up one revolutionary car too many. From my deep knowledge of the technicalities, I was able to advise Nigel on the finer points of strategy that would make him champion of the world. By now, the championship was down to 4 men, of whom Mansell's teammate Piquet was just as fast and being paid 4 times as much. I guarded my delicate ears against the shock as Senna, currently coming third in the championship, prepared to leave the pits. Ahead of Senna and lying second to Mansell in the championship table was Prost, whom I congratulated on his speed in practice.
Yes, but you know, if you look at the speed trap, we are exactly 20 kilometers slower than the Benetton with the BMW engine at the end of the straight. That's why I said that I'm very happy, and I can't go much quicker. In any case, I can't be on pole.
I wondered why this guy was pointing his lens in the wrong direction, and then it all became clear. 2 regular inhabitants of the Royal Palace in Monaco, Jackie Stewart was present with Prince Albert. The missing Alboreto suddenly appeared on the second day of practice. The injuries incurred while riding a motorcycle in the shower miraculously healed. To the immense relief of all Italy, he was able to drive. To the ecstasy of all Italy, the Ferrari went better than it had done for some time. Fabi's Benetton went even better and he got the pole. But even though Fabi was Italian and Benetton was an Italian sponsor, as far as the Tifosi were concerned, he might as well have been Albanian, because he wasn't driving a Ferrari. At the start of the warm-up lap, Prost's car didn't go anywhere. Fabi's car didn't go much further. Prost ran back to the pit lane from which he would have to start in the spare car, while Fabi got going again and trailed the field around to the back of the grid, having exchanged first position for last. So Mansell found himself on the pole. All this happened before the race even started. When it did, Berger outdragged Mansell, with Piquet, Arnoux and Alboreto all chasing them. Senna was left standing, his transmission shot. So it was Berger, Mansell, Piquet, Arnoux and Alboreto. With all Italy watching, Alboreto went past Arnoux into fourth spot as Rosberg tried to shake off Johansson, the honorary Italian. Tombé's Lola looked bad enough until you saw the other guy. Patrese in the ill-fated Brabham, which didn't really need this on top of everything else. Mansell took first place from Berger as they accelerated out of the Parabolica. Then Piquet went past Berger into second place, with Alboreto also looking ambitious. Alboreto's Ferrari went past Berger's Benetton into third place, cheered to the echo even by those Italians wearing Benetton sports shirts. Prost had started even further back than Fabi, but now went past him into eighth place. Alboreto proved that the Ferrari was still a handful. He spun the car, creating the same effect in the audience as if he'd thrown a tomato at the Pope. Having allowed him to risk his neck for almost half the race, after much confabulation, the officials decided to black flag Prost for being foolish enough to listen to them when they allowed him to start. For 2 laps, he understandably ignored the signal, but then stopped with a blown engine. At one time, he was 5th and certainly would have gone even higher. It is worth reflecting, in view of later events, that Prost was not without his share of bad luck in 1986. Alboreto got moving again after his spin, but eventually retired. The leading 4, Mansell, Piquet, Berger and Johansson, all made pit stops but ended up in the same order. Piquet, however, now saw the possibility of demoting his teammate to second place. In the days of team orders, this sort of racing between colleagues was never allowed to happen, to the sport's great loss. It's one of the ways in which Grand Prix racing has definitely improved, although Mansell might not exactly have been ecstatic when Piquet went by into the lead. Fabi went out in the middle of the Gobi Desert. Piquet took the checkered flag, with Mansell second, followed home in third place by Johansson's Ferrari. The 2 Williams Hondas looked very dominant indeed. But Piquet made it clear that being on the team didn't make him happy about sharing what he knew with his teammate.
It's very difficult to race a championship with somebody that is very good like Nadio and have the same car, have the same information, knows everything about me, know all my tricks, and know what a car I'm running, know my setup. You know, it'll be very, very difficult.
A Ferrari had at least come third, so the crowd stayed to be sprayed. And so to Portugal, where they speak the language of Piquet and Senna. Lisbon is a good-looking city, which the Grand Prix circuit seldom gets to see because the circuit is a long way away. 2 years before, Esteril's first Grand Prix had been the last of the season, the race where Lauda won his last World Championship by half a point, and where Prost had lost. The 1986 championship wouldn't conclude here, but it might be decided. By this stage, points were getting crucial. Senna was learning Japanese, Rotas Honda. Didier Pironi seemed to be thinking of a comeback. Lauda came back only to enjoy Jean-Marie Ballestri's legendary charm. Rosberg's McLaren was painted yellow to match the local Marlboro packet. Would he help Prost in the last 3 races?
No, we haven't discussed any team orders or anything like that. The only thing we've done until now is that I said Ron Dennis asked me if it was okay that Alan would keep the spare car for the last 3 races. It was very nicely asked, and there was absolutely nothing, no objection from my side. I think it's the least we can do.
So Prost had full backing from his teammate as he faced up to the slim chance of keeping his championship. Mansell could perhaps not count on similar self-sacrifice from Piquet. For Senna, racing for the pole in his team of 1, the question didn't arise. When Senna climbed out of the car, he had his pulse taken by team manager Peter Waugh, then by designer Gerard Ducarouge. They were checking up on their investment. But all eyes were on Bernie Ecclestone as he made Piquet, Mansell, Prost and Senna pose for a group shot to show that at the top of Grand Prix racing they were all buddies like the Politburo. The funny thing is that it's almost true. Even when they hate each other, it's on first-name terms. At the green light, Mansell out-dragged Senna towards the first corner. Into the romantically named first turn, Mansell led Senna, Berger, Piquet, Prost, Fabi and Rosberg in the yellow pearl. Mansell pulled away from everybody except Senna. Patrese had not given up on the Brabham and was trying hard. Gradually Mansell began to leave even Senna at a loss. Piquet and Prost queued up to get past Berger. Piquet finally got by. Prost having already got past Berger, now it was Rosberg's turn. Who said he was yellow? Jones, whose short period of euphoria with the Lola was by now over, spun out, got out, and walked out. Mansell ran on in first place. And Senna in second. Mansell came in for new wheels. He went out again, still ahead. All the fighting was for second place. Senna, Piquet and Prost slugged it out. Warwick was already having a miserable time in the Brabham and didn't need a bonfire on top of it. Mansell rollicked along on top of his form, all his confidence restored. Far back, Senna, Piquet and Prost were still at it, their life made even more interesting by a Portuguese marshal. Then Piquet overdid it, but he kept the Honda howling and got back into what was left of the race. The race was most decisively won by Mansell, although he had been well aided by the Honda engine's cleverly computerized capacity for delivering more horsepower per hour. Senna's Lotus Renault did not enjoy this advantage, and once again he had to fishtail home, sinking from second place. So Prost came second and Piquet third. Fabi ran out of gas. Senna trickled in fourth. Mansell was on top of the championship, and it didn't look as if Prost could catch even Piquet.
Anyway, second place is not bad, but I think now for the championship will be very difficult. But I'm very pleased for Nigel. I think he really deserved it this year.
That means you concede the World Championship, yes?
I mean, I will fight until the end. But I must admit that to be realistic, I think Nigel is world champion today, but it's not finished yet.
It was the most important race of all year because we're coming to the end of the year and only 2 more races to go. And with Nelson and Alan, the current world champion, right behind me, I just had to win if I was going to keep in touch.
You can win the championship in Mexico.
Let's hope so. I'm not thinking about it still, Murray. I've done the best job I can today and it's got me 9 points. Unfortunately, at the next race, we've got to start dropping points. So I don't know, there's still 2 races to go.
At the champagne squirting contest, Mansell and Piquet looked almost friendly, Perhaps Piquet, like Prost, had resigned himself to the notion that this was Mansell's year. Next stop, Mexico, where the car racing circuit used to look like this. But now they are given the circuit a lick of paint and it looked like this. With the season almost over by now, every team had the technology to cope with the fuel limit, and there was talk of future formula finagling to limit power and expense. Getting rid of turbos being too simple a solution, FISA proposed a choice between pop-off valves, stopcock nipples, and double downdraft upswept cam knockers. Balestri promised he would listen to everybody's views before taking his usual arbitrary decision. Berger and the other drivers were agog at the prospect. While Piquet watched the Dow Jones Index on TV, the lower-paid Mansell was going for the pole. All he had to do was finish fourth and he would wrap up the championship. Surrounded by advisors, Prost politely pretended to listen. Berger and the Benetton had now definitely arrived as a contending combination. But Senna once again blasted his way to the pole, winning his 8th free Vespa of the season. Over the ship-to-shore radio, Senna told his team manager Peter Ward that he could have the scooter. The world's communications media were there to record this unprecedented stroke of generosity. Senna was obviously a hot contender for the race, but now that he couldn't win the championship, the world wanted to know if he would help anyone else.
It doesn't concern me, really. I have to look after what the team puts behind me and try to give them back the best result as possible. And therefore, it doesn't make any difference for me whoever is around and trying to win championship or the race, whatever.
All Mansell had to do was go. At the green light, however, Mansell either failed to find first gear or, some later suggested, simply forgot to select it in all the excitement. Senna and Piquet raced for the first corner, with Berger, Prost, Alboreto and the temporarily functional Tombe leading the pack behind them. Piquet beat them out of the first corner and led the race. Mansell was 19th. The action up ahead was fast and furious. Senna took the inside line, but Piquet gave him the choice of second place or the cement. So it was Piquet, Senna, Berger and Prost. Prost smoothly moved up to take third place. Mansell, who'd been pressing hard to make up time, came in with a blistered tyre on lap 11, but all was not yet lost. Piquet led, followed by Senna, Prost and Berger. Prost's pit stop, which was to be his only one, dropped him from third to sixth, and Piquet's, which was to be one of three, dropped him from first to third. He was cooking his tyres like tortillas. Senna now led from Berger. But Senna needed new wheels as well. Berger was in the lead, out there selling clothes for Benetton in front of umpteen million viewers. Mansell stopped again, dropping down to ninth, that crucial fourth place still tantalizingly out of reach. In fact, it was being occupied suavely by Prost. Piquet stopped again. Senna stopped again. Berger hadn't stopped at all and still led the race, with Prost now second. Piquet stopped yet again, returning to the race in 6th spot. This allowed Mansell to catch him up. Mansell was now 5th, but the 4th place he wanted was fully occupied by Piquet, who wasn't in the least helpful. Johansson was a lap behind Senna when something serious happened to the Ferrari's engine. Steam was eventually joined by flame, plus a lot of oil. Patresi's flat Brabham hit the Ferrari's oil and went into a flat spin. The circuit being by now well oiled, Mansell decided to wait for Australia. Berger won his first Grand Prix, which was terrific news for Benetton and good for the sport. The whole race had hinged on tyre stops, of which everyone had made at least one except Berger, who had made none at all. What was he putting in the rubber?
I put on the left side hard tyres and the right side soft tyres. And I wasn't sure, but after half distance I feel the tyres feels all right, so I was trying to do all the race without pit stop.
It was Berger's turn to feel the heady delights of champagne-soaked overalls. Mansell had fought back hard for his 2 points, but would have to discard them. Prost would keep his 6 points and thus be in striking distance of Mansell for the championship, with one race to go. So it all came down to Australia, where, to be sure of the championship, Mansell would have to finish 3rd or better. In its 2nd year, the Australian Grand Prix was once again held in Adelaide, the pretty city on which, according to the locals, it had never rained. I met the local representative of FISA.
Gorgeous.
Senna, the championship now lost to him, was uncharacteristically free of care. The entire country had gone car race crazy. In the whole Grand Prix season, it had scarcely rained anywhere, not even in Monaco. But now, in the city of surefire sunshine, the sky looked the reverse of radiant. Fans thronged the shopping malls to buy raincoats. Out at the track, I made my last pre-race promenade of an exciting season. But for the true fan, the season is always exciting. Whatever happens to the formula in Formula One, it's still number one. Once you have seen and heard the cars close up, you want to be there always. By now, I recognized almost every face.
G'day, Australia.
I wouldn't put any money on any of them.
Piquet fell into an awed silence, having met someone who earns money even faster than he does. Sterling couldn't stay away either. Speaking through an interpreter, Bernie had a word with Honda-san, who had flown down from Tokyo to see his engine win. Or was Bernie buying Honda? Bernie organized the whole Grand Prix circus for a group photo. The class of '86. Rain fell before practice. The track started off very wet, as Senna discovered. It was still wet for Johansson, who slid into the wall with a fearsome crunch. The track was starting to dry when Mansell clouted the wall, dislocating his rear suspension. The track was dry when Tombe went off it, but the grass verge was a quagmire. Between practice sessions, clouds stored up more rain so that they could dump it on the cars. I had hoped that these two were my fans, but it turned out they had mistaken me for Christian Danner. Prost didn't really need to separate the two Williams Honda drivers. They were friends again, or at least trying to look like it.
I can't believe they are much quicker than us. So in this fact, I would say that they're going to fight together and it's going to be good for me.
I'm delighted because, I mean, you couldn't have someone better next to you than your teammate, and he's got to win the race, so the last thing he'll be doing is sort of dicing at the first corner. It's 82-lap race, and, you know, it's the 82nd lap that counts and not the first lap.
Now I go try to push Mansell out and try to win the race.
He was joking, of course. Race day dawned gloomy, but at least the rain did not actually fall on the morning warm-up lap. Mostly it just sort of leaked. Rosberg had won this race last year and would like to win it again as he said farewell. Prost was under an umbrella and under pressure, although his interpretation was that everybody else was. Piquet was second on the grid alongside Mansell and would be unlikely to say after you into the first corner. Pole sitter Mansell also had the burden of the British press to contend with. Can Nigel do it? They were screaming helpfully. This time Mansell found first gear all right, but Senna got a flying start and bustled up behind him as he led the field into the first corner. Then Senna got past Mansell, with Piquet still third, although Rosberg was right on his tail. Next it was Piquet's turn to pass Mansell, who was content to ease off, since he was only racing for third place. But Rosberg, up from 7th place in half a lap, grabbed third place for himself. There had been 3 different leaders in the first lap in a wickedly fast race that only Rosberg seemed to be finding too sedate. Rosberg went past Senna into 2nd place. Senna was going backwards and Mansell went past him with no trouble into 3rd spot. Rosberg, his tyres at screaming pitch, went past Piquet into the lead. Prost went past Senna to take 4th spot. Up at the front, Rosberg was romping along. It was a street circuit and the old street fighter was in his element. Piquet demoted himself from 2nd to 4th by doing an elaborate spin, a lapse which he made up for by his uncanny skill at keeping the Honda howling in its usable rev range while the world swiveled around his helmet. Prost made an early pit stop with a punctured right front tyre. This dropped him from 2nd to 4th, and he must have already been seeing the World Championship trophy leaving his sideboard for the Isle of Man. But it didn't stop him concentrating. Piquet came boiling back into the main action. Prost's prediction came true as Piquet raced Mansell and went past him into 2nd place behind Rosberg. Rosberg's right rear tyre delaminated itself. A nice way of saying it didn't actually blow out, but it blew Rosberg out of the race. Lapping Alio, Mansell was coming up behind Prost when the World Championship blew up in his left ear. Mansell drove with consummate skill to escape death, a deliverance which made him feel lucky next day, but not today. Piquet, suddenly circumspect, came in for a precautionary pit stop to check out a vibration. He dropped to 2nd place behind Prost. Next year, Nigel. Prost won the race. Johansson had done well in his last trip for Ferrari. There were 2 British drivers on the board, but neither of them was called Nigel Mansell. Prost won his 2nd World Championship by 2 points. Or, to put it another way, Mansell lost his 1st World Championship by 2 points. In the Constructors' Championship, Williams was well up on McLaren, so they had something to console themselves with. Prost, a generous man and a gentleman as well as a magical driver, in his moment of triumph paid tribute to Mansell in his moment of defeat.
I cannot believe, it's fantastic. I knew that it was possible, I was always confident. I was confident about my car, about my team. They've done a fantastic job, but I knew that I need luck, a little bit of luck to win this championship, and I had some luck today. So it's really fantastic. but that's my luck. I'm very sorry for them. For KK, because he has done a fantastic race, I mean, especially the beginning, and very, very hard first lap. It was fantastic, and I knew that he could help me, so I was very confident. I was very pleased that he was leading the race, and also I'm very sorry for Nigel, because I know how it is to lose the championship as the last race, and I'm very, very sorry for him. It must be very hard.
So all the belligerence turned to bubbles and all the fraughtness to froth. It was the last sponsored spume of the year, and they gave it all to Balestri. And that was how it all came out. Once again, the best man had won. He also came second, third, and filled all the other places. Next year, there would be new cars, new drivers, new sponsors. Everything has to change.